Baldpate Mountain seen from Fiddler's Creek Preserve. Baldpate is a long, low ridge with a relief of almost 400 feet at its highest point. Baldpate Mountain, an outlier of the Sourland Mountain, formed when magma intruded into shale in the Triassic area approximately 200 million years ago. The shale gradually eroded away, leaving an elevated diabase ridge, the Sourland Mountain, and smaller outcrops, including Baldpate Mountain and the Mount Rose Ridge. The Sourland Mountain and its outliers contain the largest expanses of contiguous forest in central New Jersey. The Sourland Mountain region is an important bird area with continental ranking. Bird's eye view of Baldpate Mountain. 176 bird species have been reported to eBird at Baldpate, including 38 warbler species. Baldpate has the highest density of nesting neotropical migrants in New Jersey and the largest number of breeding neotropical species in central New Jersey. Baldpate is vulnerable because it is at the lower size limit for interior forest species and because the long, narrow shape has a large edge effect. The proposed Penn East pipeline would cut approximately 400 feet off the preserve south of the power line road, shown toward the top, decreasing the forest size and enhancing edge effect by increasing the narrowness of the preserve. This hooded warbler has been parasitized by a brown-headed cowbird. The cowbird chick probably either ejected the eggs or the young of the warbler. The percentage of nest parasitized is higher on edges and increases with increasing edge effect. 17 warbler species have breeding records at Baldpate, including the black and white warbler, the American redstart, and the common yellow throat shown here. Why so many species? Baldpate is long and narrow with a high edge to area ratio. This means that the edge effect extends deep into Baldpate, make it a mosaic of interior forest species in more shaded areas and edge species in denser undergrowth in areas with less canopy. Unfortunately, the long, narrow shape also makes Baldpate more susceptible to predators and nest parasites. Black and white warblers nest at the base of trees, surrounded by dense vegetation to hide the nest. American redstart prefers moist, deciduous second-growth woods with abundant shrubs. They are area sensitive, preferring interior forests. Nests are placed in a tree or shrub, usually surrounded by foliage within a well-vegetated site. Common yellowthroats nest anywhere on Baldpate where there is suitable shrub habitat, both in the fields and the heavily vegetated forest openings. 3 species of neotropical warblers that breed at the field-forest interface of Baldpate. Clockwise from upper left: blue-winged warbler, chestnut-sided warbler, and yellow warbler. Wood warblers are the fastest declining family of neotropical migrants and the second fastest declining family overall, with a 37.6% loss of breeding individuals since 1970 and astounding 617.5 million adult birds gone, with 64% of the species in decline. Baldpate is a mecca for birders, mainly because of the breeding warbler population. Birds in Forest and Landscape is a breeding bird study designed by the Cornell Laboratory of Ornithology. The protocol is done twice a breeding season at 5 sites at Baldpate in late May and early June. Both male and female Canada and cerulean warblers were found on the Switchback Trail in May and June of 2017. There are 5 BFL records at 3 sites for the Canada warbler, with the last record in 2020. 4 records at 2 sites for the cerulean warbler, with the last record in 2021, and 3 records at 2 sites for the northern parrot, with the last record in 2018. The last record for all 3 species was on the Switchback Trail. Canada warblers nest on or near the ground in heavy woodland undergrowth. Northern parallels build pendant nests in trees. They are rare breeders in areas that lack lichens and mosses, their preferred nest building material. Cerulean warblers nest in the upper part of the tallest trees in deciduous forests. Canada and cerulean warblers are among the fastest declining warbler species. As the percentage of multiflora rose and other invasive non-plants increased, thicket nesting birds, including the eastern towhee and the gray catbird, replaced the native understory nesting birds. Baldpate also has species that prefer the canopy for nesting, including scarlet tanagers and yellow-throated vireos. Ash tree dieback is creating significant canopy gaps in some areas. Neotropical species that breed at Baldpate include the blue-gray gnatcatcher, house wren, Baltimore oriole, indigo bunting, rose-breasted grosbeak. 26 neotropical species of conservation concern have been confirmed breeding at Baldpate. Baldpate is an important migrant stop as well. Baldpate Mountain is the first wooded ridge birds see when flying north in the spring, after crossing the wasteland of central New Jersey, with much cleared land, useless expanses of lawn, and few native plants. Neotropical migrants seen at Baldpate include clockwise blackpoll warbler shown in fall or basic plumage, the male black-throated blue warbler, magnolia warbler, myrtle race of yellow warbler, black-throated green warbler, and female black-throated blue warbler in the picture. Winter residents include ruby-crowned kinglet, long-eared owl, hermit thrush, brown creeper, and winter wren. The New Jersey threatened long-eared owl was photographed in a cedar stand slated to be cut for the proposed Penneys pipeline. The other New Jersey threatened owl at Baldpate is the barred owl, a breeding resident. Permanent residents include tufted titmouse, pileated woodpecker, and white-breasted nuthatch. Birds are not the only animals found at Baldpate. 8 reptile species have been documented at Baldpate by Washington Cross and Audubon board member Mark Manning, 6 snakes and 2 turtles, including the eastern box turtle, a New Jersey special concern species. Several other species have been reported by other observers, but not confirmed recently. Individual box turtles can be identified by differences in color and shell pattern. Note the difference in eye color in the top 2 pictures. The brown-eyed turtle on the left is a female. The red-eyed turtle on the right is a male. Box turtles have a small home range with a diameter of 750 feet and are very sensitive to disturbance, usually dying if moved out of their home range. If you come upon one, please do not move it. Box turtles are most often seen in June when the females come out of the woods to lay their eggs, as several of these females are doing. Mark Manning also documented 12 amphibian species at Baldpate, 5 salamanders and 7 frogs and toads, including Fowler's toad, a New Jersey special concern species. Amphibians are very sensitive to environmental indicators because of their high susceptibility to toxins due to their permeable skins. Amphibians are one of the fastest declining groups of vertebrates, even in more trouble than birds. The primary causes of this decline are habitat loss and degradation, disease, and climate change. Baldpate also has plant species that are forest specialists. Spring ephemerals are wildflowers that bloom on the forest floor before the trees leaf out. Take advantage of higher light conditions at that time. From left to right, bloodroot, rue anemone, and Virginia bluebells. There are 20 listed plant species on Baldpate, 5 endangered, 8 threatened, and 7 special concern. The showy orchis is perhaps the most beautiful flowering plant on Baldpate. Understory plants provide shelter and food for birds that nest in the understory or on the ground. The native understory at Baldpate is dominated by spicebush. Spicebush is also the larval food for the spicebush swallowtail butterfly. Lipid-rich berries are important for fall migrants. Peak thrush migration coincides with peak fruit ripeness, an example of coevolution, showing the dependence of native birds on native plants. The mature plants produce an aromatic substance that deter the deer, but the deer predate the young spicebush plants, preventing regeneration. A typical scene in the Sourlands with native understory destroyed by overabundant white-tailed deer and replaced by invasive non-native plants. This degraded habitat supports very little bird life. The Sourland Mountain has a larger contiguous forest area than Baldpate, but very little healthy native understory. Healthy spicebush dominated understory at Baldpate taken in 2010. Hooded Kentucky and worm-eating warblers require a healthy native dominated understory for nesting. These species are associated with Spicebush Understory at Baldpate. In 2010, Baldpate had a larger expanse of healthy understory than the Sourland Mountain. The same area in 2021 partially degraded, but the understory is still Spicebush dominated. Not pristine, but a Kentucky warbler nested here this year. The Spicebush dominated understory is present now only in a few areas of Baldpate, mostly associated with the steeper slopes that were not cleared for farming. Most of Baldpate is now degraded and unsuitable for these warbler species for nesting. In 2010, Mike Van Cleef of Friends of Hopewell Valley Open Space and I did a study of hooded and Kentucky warbler breeding sites at the Stiles Nature Preserve at Baldpate and the Sourland Ecosystem Preserve, then the Northern Stony Brook Preserve. We quantified the percent native and non-native vegetation of the breeding sites. Over 80% native cover was needed for breeding for both species. At both sites, the native color was predominantly spicebush. I want to look at this a little more closely for a minute. On the far left, with bird territories used at Baldpate, and notice that the total cover was around 96–97%. Native cover was greater than 82%, and there was substantial but not dominant non-native cover between 30 and 40%. We also took parameters of random points not being used by the warblers, and you can see that the native cover and non-native cover are basically reversed. If you go further over to hooded warbler sites, Kentucky warbler, we didn't find a lot of difference between the two species, but both were using more than 80% non-native cover. Now, if you go to the far right, you see Mike's data from random points from all over the state. And this should show you, compared to the graphs of the territories the birds are using, that this type of habitat in New Jersey is rare indeed and very precious for these nesting species. Kentucky warblers breed in human deciduous forests or dense second growth with a slightly open canopy, dense understory, and well-developed ground cover. The nest is on or near the ground with the base on the ground anchored by a small shrub, preferably spicebush. The nest may be wedged in dead twigs with a bulky foundation of dead leaves. Kentucky warblers have a small breeding distribution where they breed in low density. They are associated with mature forest on breeding and wintering grounds, habitat loss on both breeding and wintering grounds, and fragmentation and degradation on breeding grounds is causing a steep decline in numbers. Hooded warblers are associated with mature deciduous forests, where they nest in shrubs and dense deciduous undergrowth. The nest is often hidden in a cluster of dead leaves. Hooded warblers have a small breeding range. They are declining from loss of habitat on the wintering grounds and habitat degradation and fragmentation on the breeding grounds. Worm-eating warblers breed in well-drained upland deciduous forests with a shrub understory, preferring hillsides with moderate to steep slopes and mature woods with dense patches of shrubs and saplings. The nest is on the ground. They have a small breeding distribution where they breed in low density and a restricted winter distribution in tropical forests. Worm-eating warblers are declining from habitat loss and degradation on wintering and breeding grounds. A 2008 to 2017 breeding bird survey showed hooded and Kentucky warblers declining and worm-eating warblers not showing significant change over a 10-year period. Hooded warblers were the most numerous species, but suffered an approximately 30% loss over a decade. The Kentucky warbler population crashed at Baldpate in 2012, but partially recovered. The census combined data from 2 routes, an approximately 6-mile loop, including 3 high-quality Spicebush dominated understory areas along parts of the Copper Hill Trail, the Ridge Trail, and the Northwest Trail, and an approximately 2.3-mile loop, including high-quality Spicebush understory adjacent to the Summit Trail and the road. The eastern chipmunk population exploded on Baldpate along the Northwest Trail in 2012. Nest predation was a probable factor in the Kentucky warbler decline that year at that site. There is healthy understory along the Northwest Trail, but the trail is located near an edge, increasing the population of nest predators. The edge location makes the area much more susceptible to disturbance. The trend lines for eBird high numbers show all 3 species declining from 2010 to 2020, the last complete breeding season. eBird high numbers include all birds, breeding males, females, fledglings, and migrants. The hooded warbler population shows the greatest loss, declining sharply in 2020. The eBird high numbers were obtained on the 6-mile loop used for the singing male census study. While the absolute numbers vary, the 2 methods show a similar pattern in the overlapping years and similar downward trend lines. The singing male census was more rigorous, but the eBird numbers track the census numbers, giving confidence that the downward trend is and the 22,000 population collapse are real. eBird high numbers can be useful for showing trends if the same route is followed in subsequent years and the same methodology is used in counting the birds. In addition to the 3 listed warbler species that breed yearly on Baldpate, there are 2 listed thrushes breeding annually on Baldpate. The wood thrush's preferred habitat is the interior and edges of mixed deciduous forests with cool, moist sites. They nest in lower limbs of trees and shrubs. Breeding success is higher in the interior forest sites because fewer nests are parasitized by brown-headed cowbirds. In some areas, 100% of the nests are parasitized by brown-headed cowbirds in small lots. Wood thrushes are one of the fastest declining species due to habitat loss on wintering ground and fragmentation on breeding ground, which has allowed increased cowbird predation. Another factor in their decline is that acid rain has caused a decline in snails needed for calcium for egg formation. The thrush family has the 9th greatest loss, with a 10.1% loss of breeding adults since 1970, 77.6 million birds, with 55% of the species showing loss. Veeries breed in damp deciduous forests with areas of open canopy and dense understory. The nest is on or just above the ground in low shrubs or brush piles. Veeries are declining because of habitat loss and degradation on the breeding grounds and probably the wintering grounds, which are poorly known. Study is desperately needed to find out where these declining birds are wintering. The wood thrush breeding population increased from 2008 to 2017. The breeding veery population decreased slightly. Again, note the trend lines, the dotted lines, which average out the ups and downs between various years. Total number of birds reported to eBird from 2010 to 2020. This includes breeders and non-breeders. Note the decrease in numbers reported after 2017 corresponding to the time frame when ash tree dieback became a major factor at Baldpate. The Ovenbird is the most numerous breeding Neotropical migrant at Baldpate. Ovenbirds nest on the ground in the leaf litter. The dome-shaped nest is constructed from the leaf litter, with the opening on the side so the structure resembles an old-fashioned oven, hence the name Ovenbird. The 2008 to 2017 breeding census showed an increase in ovenbird numbers. The population increase from 2008 to 2016 partially reflects habitat improvement due to less deer predation on plants. Hunting on Baldpate has reduced the deer population, although not by enough. eBird records show a sharp decrease after 2017, after an increasing trend from 2010 to 2017. Ash tree dieback, resulting in thick multiflora rose growth, is a factor in this decline. Ovenbirds need access to the leaf litter. Even the most numerous breeding bird on Baldpate is affected by the habitat decline. 2010 map of hooded and Kentucky warbler locations at Baldpate. Note that the breeding territories are approximately evenly distributed on both the eastern and western sides of Baldpate. Kentucky hooded and worm-eating warbler GPS points 2020 with switchback trail sites were moved to show the same area surveyed in 2010. Most eastern breeding sites are gone. Ash tree dieback, leading to invasive species outcompeting spicebush is a factor. The result in multiflora rose thickets are too dense for the warblers, and the rose does not support the native insects that the warblers need to feed their young. Note the decrease in Kentucky warbler sites along the Northwest Trail, reflecting the 2012 crash. This is the same map with the switchback trail sites restored. The eastern side of Baldpate has deteriorated significantly, as I previously pointed out. Most remaining breeding territories are clustered on the western end of Baldpate, where small areas of native species dominated understory are still found. Mike Van Cleef of Friends of Hopewell Valley Open Space mapped the percentage ash in the overstory at Baldpate. In some areas, ash tree dieback from the emerald ash borer has been devastating, both from the loss of canopy trees and the resultant overgrowth of invasive understory due to increasing light levels. Spicebush will outcompete multiflora rose in the shade, but the rose will greatly outcompete the spicebush in higher light levels. Mike, thank you very much for sharing your map. In 2020, breeding hooded Kentucky and worm-eating warblers were clustered on the west end of Baldpate along the northwest or red trail shown in the top half, and the switchback or yellow trail, which are points along the bottom half. The proposed connector trails to the Moore Station Quarry are a threat to these shy, sensitive interior forest species. The quarry development plans could negatively affect the last stronghold of these breeding warblers on Baldpate. High-quality spicebush-dominated understory is very limited in size and has been declining both in area and quality. It should not be further fragmented. Map of singing male Kentucky hooded and worm-eating warblers along the switchback and northwest trails in mid-May 2021. These species are singing on territory by mid-May. Kentucky warblers are very shy and do not tolerate a high level of disturbance. The Switchback Trail was opened in 2017. Kentucky warblers were seen from the trail the first year it opened, but moved further away from the trail each successive year. 2020 was the last year they were confirmed nesting in the vicinity of the Switchback Trail. The area of suitable habitat is small, and they can only move a short distance from the trail if disturbed. Human traffic increased significantly along the trail in 2020 and 2021 due to the pandemic. Gyms were closed, so many more people came to Baldpate, and the Switchback Trail became the trail to do if you wanted to benefit from the exercise. It had been good for people, but it was a disaster for the Kentucky warblers. The Morris Station Quarry Park plan proposes moving the Switchback Trail closer to the Northwest Trail and adding a connector trail to the quarry, forming a loop trail which includes 2 of the 3 remaining Kentucky warbler territories on Baldpate. A proposed overlook to the quarry would link to the loop trail. This loop trail with overlook would greatly increase the human presence on the western part of the Northwest Trail, which contains one of the highest quality Spicebush understories left on Baldpate, and the only one supporting 2 adjacent breeding territories of Kentucky warbler. If this loop trail is built, there is a high probability that Kentucky warblers will no longer breed on Baldpate. While the western end of Baldpate is the stronghold for the Kentucky warbler until the 2020 population crash, the steeper parts of the Copper Hill Trail and the central part of the Ridge Trail, where Spicebush Understory dominated, had a significant hooded warbler population. In the last year of the Mapping Singing Male Study, 2017, 3 hooded warbler territories were documented along the Copper Hill Trail. There was 1 territory at the western intersection of the Copper Hill Trail and the Ridge Trail. There were 7 territories on the Ridge Trail between the low point at the connector trail to the Power Line Road and the old farm, all in Spicebush dominated areas. Unfortunately, these sections of Baldpate have had significant ash tree dieback. Up to 30% of the tree species were ash in some areas, often clumped, leaving large gaps in the canopy. Where ash tree dieback occurred, multiple rows quickly overgrew the native spicebush, forming thickets that were too dense for the breeding warblers. Cutting ash trees near the trail and leaving the trees where they fell right onto Spicebush Understory also degraded viable habitat. By 2020, there was only 1 hooded warbler territory on the Copper Hill Trail. The area inside the Copper Hill Trail was burned in late April 2021 in an attempt to remove invasive species, which have increased in density with ash dieback. In previous years, 3 hooded warblers and 1 to 2 worm-eating warbler territories were along the Copper Hill Trail and the adjacent part of the Connector 1 Trail. Unfortunately, the burn impacted spicebush as well as the invasives. The pictures show the unburned or east side and the burned or west side of the Copper Hill Trail. Before the burn, spicebush dominated understory wrapped around the steeper slope of Baldpate between the Copper Hill and Ridge trails. These pictures were taken near the Copper Hill and Connector 1 Trail intersection. Hooded and worm-eating warblers nested in this area. Half of their habitat has been burned. In the more intensely burned areas, the multiple rose is resprouting from the burn. The spicebush is dead. Several weeks after I took these pictures, I went back down this trail. This area still looked dead for the spicebush. A little further down the hill, some spicebush was beginning to come up from the base of the old trees. But even if it regrows, which the deer probably will not allow because they love to browse on young spicebush, it will take at least a decade to restore the type of understory that's useful for the breeding warblers. This burn for the bird was a disaster. Habitat can also be degraded by small changes. The top section of the Blue Trail was cut through mature spicebush understory. The spicebush has been heavily cut back in places to make the trail wider. The left-hand photo shows a section still dominated by spicebush. The right-hand photo shows a part of the trail where multiflora rose is overgrown with spicebush due to the increased light level allowed by overzealous trail maintenance. Thoughtless trail maintenance that does not consider the need of breeding birds can cause a gradual degradation of habitat, especially for habitat specialists. This is what we can expect if new trails are built to make a northwest loop trail. The quarry plan calls for 3 to 5 foot trails, which will let in enough light to convert most of the area to something like we're seeing in the right-hand photo. Again, that will be a disaster for the breeding warblers. Habitat quality on Baldpate has been significantly declining in recent years due to a combination of factors resulting in explosive growth of invasive plants, which now dominate the Baldpate understory. High-quality habitat is reduced to a few small areas, barely large enough to sustain breeding birds. Any further degradation of habitat will cause the loss of breeding bird species, which have made Baldpate a birding mecca and has sustained the remaining viable breeding populations of several rare species in central New Jersey. Ash tree dieback has been a factor, but so has mismanagement. Overgrooming trails has allowed more light into the understory, with the resultant stronger growth of invasive species. Cutting new trails through sensitive habitat allowed non-native plant species to invade. Linking the quarry trails to Baldpate may be the last straw. Baldpate is highly stressed. The four-party agreement governing Baldpate states that Baldpate is a nature preserve with passive recreation allowed, and that any development plan must be, and I quote, designed to ensure the protection of rare and endangered species and natural communities found at Baldpate Mountain Park, end quote. It is totally inappropriate to link a nature preserve to a high-use active recreation site. In fact, there are better places to locate an active recreation park than next to an important bird area, which is critical to maintaining viable breeding populations of declining bird species. The link between Baldpate and the quarry needs to be dissolved if Baldpate has any chance of remaining a viable nature preserve. People have other places to recreate. Birds like Kentucky Warbler have no other place to breed, at least not in central New Jersey. The Mercer County Park Commission will be posting the revised preliminary plan, and at that time, a 60-day comment period will start. I would urge anyone who cares about Baldpate and its birds and maintaining these bird species as breeders in central New Jersey to log on to the website and let the County Park Commission know how you feel about this issue. As I've said several times during the talk, Baldpate is extremely fragile. It's highly stressed, but it's also still intact. We still have all the pieces at Baldpate. And that is just critically important if we want to restore the eastern side of Baldpate and parts of the Sourland that have badly degraded. You need at least one place where you have preserved all the parts, and that place is Baldpate Mountain. Thank you for your time and your consideration. And I will turn this back over to Anita.
Thanks, Sharyn. That was more than a little bit depressing, but I think it was very good that we got to get some of this information out to people who care as much about birds as we do. I just want to mention that in the invitation that went out to everybody, there was uh, underneath this picture of this poor little Kentucky warbler looking for someone to save its home is some links to the quarry plan on the Mercer County website. There's apparently a new survey now that's gone up. Which does not have a deadline. The deadline in the invitation said July 18th. We're not sure exactly when the new deadline is going to be, but you can still put your opinions about how the quarry plan should continue forward, what you think should be done there. On that survey, and you can also write directly to the landscape, the park planners. There's Simone Collins. There is a link in there where you can ask questions or send your comments directly to the people who are doing the planning. So we will keep you updated when I will try and get some more information about when the next plan is going to come out and when the deadline for comments will end, and get that at everybody who signed up here for either the recording or to be here at the live presentation tonight, to make sure you have completely updated information as we go forward. Does anyone have any questions for Sharyn? If you do, I could, if people promise not to all talk at once, I could unmute people who would like to speak. If they want to, press the little raise your hand icon at the bottom of the screen, or you can type your questions into the question and answer box. Hopefully everyone is hearing me. Well, I'm waiting for some questions to come in. I just want to say that I did do a site visit with Sharyn a while ago to look at the Switchback Trail in the northwest parts of the Northwest Trail where the Kentucky warblers are still holding on. And I have to say I was absolutely shocked at the degradation of the trail since the last time I visited there, which was a few years ago. I'm a Hunterdon County resident, so I spend a lot of my time in Hunterdon County, not as much time at Baldpate as some of my colleagues at Washington Crossing, and I was just absolutely shocked. The other thing that shocked me was how restricted the good spicebush habitat had become. It was kind of squeezed in between the two trails, and was, if I had to guess, I would say minimal for the two Kentucky warbler territories that were there. They had just enough for each of them, and anything else that happens is going to be a disaster. They're just not going to be able to make it. Okay, I see we have a question. Let me get that. Jackie Spritzer asked, is there some way we can have a short sample of what we can write to the Parks Commission?
I can work on that and have Fairfax post it perhaps on the website. I will make a note to myself. Washington Crossing has made a statement. I guess we could release that, but we would have to blank out two species which the county did not want us to talk about, which are at Baldpate and extend into the quarry. The irony here is that it's the county that's a main danger to these species, but yet they're telling us we can't mention them by name because that will endanger them if people know they're there. Of course, people can't protect them if they don't know. know they're present, but I guess we could release that or just reword it to, or release part of it. Or I could write something new. But yeah, we'll we'll put our heads together and figure out the sample letter.
I think that would be a good idea, just to help people focus on what the true areas of concern are, and have some
Mhm.
some sort of a common theme there in the comments going in. Um, Also, I just want to mention I will be having a personal conversation with the chief Mercer County Park Naturalist on July 13th, and I'm hoping that we can reach some sort of an agreement on how to approach this issue of sensitive species that we really don't feel comfortable staying silent about forever. So hopefully we can make some progress, but I'll keep you updated. There's a question from Landy Eden. Have you banded the Kentuckian hooded warbler at Baldpate, and have you found returning ones?
Um, could you repeat the question? I'm not quite sure I got the.
Have you banded the Kentucky?
Have I banded? Okay, that's
Banded.
what I didn't get the word banded. No, I have not banded any of the warblers at Baldpate. We do not have permission to band at Baldpate, and setting up a banding station is an incredible amount of red tape, even if we had the permission from the banding lab. So we have not banded them. What I have observed over the years is Kentucky and hooded warblers many times coming back to the same areas. And Hannah has confirmed at the Featherbed Lane banding station that when a male warbler returns again and again to the same territory, he has had success in breeding, that they will tend not to return to territories where they've not had success. So the fact that these territories have been used for years is an indication that they are having some success in breeding. Now, in this particular site, I know that the hooded warbler at the top of the Northwest Trail successfully had 2 young because we saw them, and there's a pretty good chance that the Kentucky territory closest to the trail also successfully fledged young. I saw the female as well as the male fly into one area twice, the same area. So while the male was circling around, guarding her and what was ever in the shrubs she went into. So the behavior would say that they had young in there. And seeing both the male and the female in the same small area over a period of weeks is a very good sign.
Meg asks, how receptive is Mercer County to input from the public outside the county, for example, Somerset or even another state?
They're taking input from mountain bikers in Pennsylvania, so I would think they would take comments from
Yes.
people concerned about the natural history as well.
They'd better take comments from birders. That's all I can say. If they're taking them from out of state bikers and zipliners, etc. So we're hoping. I'd say go ahead. No matter, Meg. I know you're in. I guess you're in Somerset. Go ahead and comment, please. Ted Chase asks, is there any possibility of raising spicebush seedlings and planting them with protection from deer?
I don't know of anyone who currently has the capability to do that, but the person to ask would be Mike Van Cleef at Friends of Hopewell Valley Open Space, because he's been responsible for a lot of the replanting and regenerative work that has been done at Baldpate. Mike would be the best person to ask for that.
And the Sourland Conservancy is doing some planting also on Baldpate. And I know Lori Cleveland is certainly aware of the value of spicebush, so possibly she'd be another person to ask about whether the Sourland Conservancy, which got a huge grant in order to do replantings in some of the ash, the areas that have become degraded because of the ash die-off. So possibly. Actually, Mike Van Cleef said that that spicebush seedlings grow quicker in openings in the canopy. So if you plant, we're talking about planting the spicebush at the same time as small canopy trees. So the spicebush will really grow up, giving the slower canopy trees, time to grow up as well, because they grow faster if they get more, maybe 2 or 3 times faster, I think is what he said, if they got some sun in the openings. So this, you should get in there with your spicebush seedlings and plant them in those openings if you can. And Mary Penny had a comment which is similar to that one, which is management seems to be lacking. Why not have plantings of spicebush where the ash tree has died back? And in fact, that is something to consider. Okay, David Padulo says, how many total hooded and Kentucky warbler species do you estimate there are at Baldpate currently?
I'd have to go back from the map and count them, but there are 3 Kentucky. I know there are 3 that I verified, and we're talking about 1,100 acres first, but I have verified this year 3 Kentucky territories. Yeah. 2 along the Northwest Trail, and I haven't added up all the hoodeds, but there were 2 on the Northwest Trail, 1 on the Ridge Trail, and 1 at the connection between the Ridge Trail and the Copper Hill Trail. 1 on the Copper Hill Trail, so that would be 5, and 1 along the road, so 6 for sure. Not great numbers compared to how they were a decade ago.
Absolutely not. And when you take the Sourlands as a whole and know that that's probably the last place where you're going to find either of these species now, that's even more depressing. Fairfax says you could suggest Mercer County establish a native plant nursery in the bottom of the quarry as an alternative to active recreation. I love that idea. I think that's that's a great idea. And Theodore Ted Chase notes that the trouble is Japanese stilt grass grows up in openings. That's true. And my husband, since he retired a few years ago, has made it his job to remove invasives from our little part of the Sourland mountain forest. And he's now working on stilt grass. And you would be astounded at what comes up when you remove the stilt grass. It's horrible. But it's an annual. If you get it up, it's not going to come back, at least not in that space. If you get it up before it goes to seed, that is. So you've got basically until about September to get it out. And it's astounding what comes up instead of stilt grass. We've got a couple acres of forest now that have about 10 different species of native sedges and grasses and all kinds of, including monkey flowers. We discovered we have a big growth of monkey flowers. That was a plant that used to be on the endangered list in New Jersey. I think it's off the endangered list now, but we've got huge patches of it coming up where once we got all that old stilt grass thatch off it, I'm beginning to think stilt grass may be worse than things like barberry or multiflora rose almost. So if you feel like pulling it up, you will be rewarded. It's going to really be terrible on the back, though. But it's awful.
And Baldpate, stilt grass has not been a huge problem yet. There are a few places where it's come in on paths, where paths have been made too wide. But the bigger problem at Baldpate has been the rose and the barberry, which has been greatly increasing.
The deeper shade.
Now, that's
but
not.
The thing is, the other thing people have noticed, many people I've talked to, is that the stilt grass tends to follow trails. And the more people you have on trails, that seems to be perhaps in the fall, people bringing seeds deeper into the forest because you'll find it along the trails more than anywhere else. And then it just spreads out from there. So it may be coming.
Well, there are areas in the Sourlands proper where it's horrific.
Mm-hmm. Sure is.
But I said at this point at Baldpate that
That's not your biggest
it's
problem.
not a major problem.
Yeah. Let's hope it stays that way. Um, okay, does anyone, I'm not seeing any questions that haven't been answered. Let me just refresh this. Okay, I think we're good. Okay, last chance. Does anyone have any plant questions for Fairfax about wildflowers, etc.? Okay, looks like nobody is biting. Okay, if we have no further questions, I will be sending everyone, including everybody who signed in tonight, a copy of this recording. Please feel free to share it with whomever you wish. The more people that know about this, the more of a voice that we're going to have when it comes to protecting habitat for these birds that really, really need it in our area. And I guess that's about it. So thank you very much for tuning in tonight. Please remember to share the recording when you get it with all your friends. And we'll see you in a while for our next in this series of habitats. Not sure when that's going to be. I think the next one's going to be grasslands, which I'll be working on, and we'll let you know when it's ready. Thank you very much.